The devastation of Hurricane Katrina may have come as a surprise to many people in New Orleans and around the country as well. But there are scientists and engineers, among others, who knew exactly how a devastating big hurricane would be to this low-lying area. Just months before Katrina struck, Michael Behar wrote in Popular Science magazine about the very events being played out right now in New Orleans. He is in Norfolk, Virginia this morning. Mr. Behar, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You know, I'm looking at your article here, and I'm going to paraphrase, but you wrote with frightening accuracy. You said, although hurricanes of this magnitude are extremely rare in New Orleans, the resulting storm surge would swell Lake Pontchartrain, overtop the levees, and submerge the city. What were you thinking as you watched this thing play out the other day?
Well, I was thinking it could actually get worse. What's interesting about this whole scenario is that this is not the worst they were predicting. The worst they were predicting was a Category 5 storm hitting directly on New Orleans, and this was not a Category 5 storm, and it did not hit New Orleans directly. So as horrible as it is to watch this tragedy unfold on TV and see the catastrophe, it actually could get worse. And the odds are that a storm of a Category 5 level could still hit the city within the next 50 years, 10 years, 100 years. Nobody really knows. They just know that the frequency of...
That's somewhere people don't even want to go at this point. Take me back if you can.
It's hard to imagine.
Right. I mean, you spoke with the Army Corps of Engineers. What were their main concerns? We're talking about a city that at some points is 20 feet below sea level. What were they concerned about most?
Well, their main concern was what you're seeing on TV, the flooding. The buildings that have been in New Orleans have been there, most of them for 100 years, so they've withstand other storms. But the city itself is actually sinking. And it's been sinking rapidly for the past, 50 years. And so as the city sinks and gets further below sea level, the flooding would get worse and worse, really depending on how big the storm is and the storm surge that goes with it.
Now, we have to give them some credit. They were fixing the levee system here that could handle a Category 3 storm. They were thinking about getting it to a Category 5 at some point. They were using some pretty amazing 3D technology in all of this. Describe for me how that worked and what they could predict and what they could imagine and see here.
Well, they would run computer models that would show a storm coming in and map how the storm surge would flood the city. They were actually working on a Category 3 levee system, but the funding for that was cut right at the beginning of the Iraq War and diverted to that. So they didn't really finish that. Now, had they finished it, it wouldn't have helped here because we know this was a Category 4 storm. But yes, they had on the books and on the drawing board a Category 5 levee system to protect the city. There was a couple different ideas, and they would run computer scenarios to see where the water would go, how big the levee walls would have to be to really protect the city 100% against any size storm.
So it never happened. In your opinion, where does the buck stop, if you will? Who's at fault here for not getting that through?
Well, it's a lot of short-sightedness. I mean, people are very short-sighted in this day and age, and the problem is that these kinds of storms that hit New Orleans really only happen every 300 to 500 years, and that's evidence has been found in the geological record. They study the sediment under the city, they study the wetlands. They know that every 300 to 500 years, one of these Category 5 storms hits, which would be worse than the one that we've seen this week. And those storms, come regularly, and, nobody knows when they're going to come. And so it's hard to convince someone to spend $5 billion, which was a Category 5 project cost, to do something that may not happen in their lifetime.
You hate to say you saw this one coming. Michael Behar from Popular Science magazine, thanks so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, coming up next here on the